Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into one of the most famous courtrooms in history to break down a super intense and brilliant scene from the trial of Joan of Arc. We're going to see how this young hero fought a battle not with a sword, but with her words. Honestly, it's a total masterclass in courage and quick thinking. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly how to analyze a complex scene like this for your exams.
So let me ask you something. Imagine you're on trial for your life, and you just know, that the whole system is rigged against you. The judges, they've already made up their minds. What do? Well, that is the exact spot our hero finds herself in. This isn't just a trial. It's a battle of wits against absolutely impossible odds. So to really get what's going on, we're going to follow the trial step by step. First, we'll set the stage with a heroine in chains. Then, we'll step inside the courtroom and meet all the key players. We'll watch the verbal fireworks in A Battle of Wits, and then see how the court tries to corner her with the charge of heresy. The tension's gonna crank way up when we get to the torture chamber, before it all comes down to an impossible choice with her final, incredible answer.
Alright, so first things first. How on earth did a celebrated war hero end up in chains in the first place? Let's get a little backstory.
Okay, so Joan was basically a teenager who said she was guided by divine voices, and she led the French army to these incredible victories that totally turned the tide of the 100 Years' War. I mean, she became a massive national hero. But that success didn't last long. In 1430, she was captured by her enemies and sold to the English. So just a year later, she's gone from the battlefield to a courtroom, where she's literally on trial for her life.
So let's picture the scene. It's a huge, cold stone hall in Rouen, France. The date is May 30th, 1431. You can just feel the tension in the air. Now let's meet the people who are about to decide Joan's fate.
Obviously, we have Joan, the accused, and facing her, you've got this panel. There's Judge Cauchon, a super important theologian. You've got d'Estevette, think of him as the aggressive prosecutor who's just looking for any slip-up. Then there's the Inquisitor, who seems kind of mild-mannered but is absolutely deadly serious. And finally, there's Courcelles, a young priest who's all about following the rules to the letter, no matter how cruel they seem.
So the trial begins, but not with some formal charge. Nope, it kicks off with a verbal attack, a sparring match, where the court tries to immediately make Joan look like she's reckless and can't be trusted.
Courcelles jumps in, bringing up this past escape attempt, but notice the way he phrases it. He's not just asking if she tried to escape, he's framing it as this insane, almost witch-like act, jumping from a 60-foot tower. He's trying to make her sound completely irrational right from the get-go.
And her reply? Oh, it is absolutely brilliant. She doesn't deny it. Instead, she completely reframes the whole thing with this simple, powerful analogy. She's not a crazy person. She's a captured bird. Wanting freedom isn't insane. It's the most natural thing in the world. With just one sentence, she deflects their attack and makes us see her point of view. It's masterful.
But the prosecutor, d'Estevette, he sees an opening. He decides he's going to twist Joan's simple, common-sense argument into a weapon against her, turning her natural desire for freedom into a major crime against the church itself.
And boom, he pounces. By admitting she tried to escape, d'Estevette basically shouts, "She confessed. It's heresy." All of a sudden, the stakes just skyrocketed. This isn't about escaping prison anymore. It's about being condemned for all eternity. This is a huge escalation.
You can just feel Joan's outrage, right? Her response just highlights how ridiculous the charge is. She's basically saying, "Are you for real?" To her, and probably to us, escaping prison is just common sense. It's not a religious crime.
So what even is heresy? This is a really key term you need to know. It's the crime of going against the official teachings of the church. And here's d'Estevette's sneaky argument. Since the church is the one holding her prisoner, trying to escape is like saying you know better than the church. It's kind of like a soccer player telling the referee that they don't know the rules. By trying to physically escape, he's accusing her of spiritually defying God's authority on earth.
So when Joan keeps standing up to them, Courcelles suggests the next move in their playbook: torture. Now I know that sounds absolutely barbaric, but you have to remember, at the time, this was considered a legal tool that the court could use to get a confession.
This is another one of those moments of pure genius from Joan. She doesn't scream, she doesn't cry, she doesn't plead. She uses pure logic. She points out the biggest problem with using torture to find the truth. It doesn't work. A confession you get from hurting someone is worthless. She's not just being grave here, she's completely dismantling their method. And check this out, her argument actually works. The court is suddenly divided. You've got Carcels on one side basically saying, hey, it's standard procedure, we always do this. But the inquisitor and even the main judge, Cauchon, they back down. They know she's right. A forced confession would make their final verdict look weak. With just a few logical sentences, Joan has managed to turn her accusers against each other.
Okay, so Judge Cauchon can see the trial is stalling, and he decides to go for the kill. He steps in with one final, very serious question. And you have to know, this is a carefully worded legal trap, designed to give Joan absolutely no way out.
Let's break this down because it is a seriously clever trap. The church militant is just a fancy term for the church here on earth. In other words, the very men who are judging her. So what Cauchon is really asking is, will you accept our judgment as God's judgment? Think about it. If she says yes, she's admitting they're right and she's guilty. If she says no, she's openly defying the church, which is the definition of heresy. It's a classic catch-22. She's trapped.
And Joan begins to answer. For just a split second, it sounds like she's finally giving in. You can just imagine Cauchon leaning forward, thinking he's finally broken her spirit. And there it is, the brilliant twist. With that one little condition, she flips the entire trap back on them. She's saying, sure, I'll obey the church, unless it tells me to do something impossible. And what's the impossible thing? Betraying the divine voices she hears, which she believes is God's direct will. She found a way to obey a higher power without technically defying the men in that room. It is an absolutely masterful move.
So let's wrap this up. What are the big takeaways from this incredible scene? First, Joan is not just a passive victim here. She is smart, she's an active fighter in her own defense. Second, this trial is basically a war of words, and Joan's best weapon is simple common sense. And finally, her defiance isn't just stubbornness, it's strategic and incredibly intelligent, leading to this brilliant checkmate that leaves her accusers totally stumped.
Okay, now for the important part. How can you use this for your exams? When you need to analyze a scene, just follow these 4 steps. 1. Identify the core conflict. Here, it's Joan's common sense versus the court's complicated religious law. 2. Analyze the character motivations. What does everyone want? 3. Find the key quotes. Pinpoint those powerful lines like "the bird will fly out." And 4. Explain the significance. Why does this scene matter? Here, it shows Joan's unbreakable spirit and her intelligence. Follow these steps and you're going to write an amazing analysis.
And that leaves us with one last question for you to think about. In any trial, you have the law, and then you have the person. If you were sitting on that jury, after watching her sharp mind and her incredible courage, would it make you start to question the official charges against her? It's a really interesting question about what justice really is. Give it some thought. Thanks so much for joining this breakdown, and I'll see you next time.